Hey guys, it's Daniel with Hardlands Media, and here's another perspective that we have. So Tulsi Gabbard is someone who we have covered extensively here on Hardlands Media. She has been a very, very important voice in this entire primary, and one reason why is what we're dealing with right now, and that is the current escalation towards war with Iran. And she was recently on MSM and actually got a not terrible interview, but there were still a lot of issues with it. Let's start and see what happens.
If you were in charge, what would your policy in the Middle East be? How many troops would you leave, if any at all? And how would you deal with what is now an escalating crisis with Iran? Tensions are escalating.
Tensions are dangerously escalating. Given the situation of where we are today, I would remove our troops from Iraq and Syria specifically because of what I mentioned. Number one, they've got no clear achievable mission that they are there to accomplish that serves our national security interests. And number two, the longer they are there, the more likely it is that they are at risk, and we find ourselves in this quagmire of a war with Iran that nobody really knows what they're trying to do. What needs to happen now, and if I were president today, I would work to de-escalate tensions, get the United States and Iran back into the Iran nuclear agreement to prevent them from continuing to enrich uranium and develop their nuclear weapons capability, remove these crippling sanctions that are really a modern day siege, a tactic of war, and work towards actually working out the differences that we have with Iran on a parallel track, the issues that have been brought up with regards to the expiration dates in the nuclear deal, their missile capability, and other issues. We've got to choose diplomacy and prevent an escalation of this war.
So there you go. That's Tulsi in a nutshell. That's what we've come to expect with her, calling for us to leave these areas in the Middle East, because what are we really doing? We're just causing suffering on our troops. We're costing ourselves a lot of money that we're not then spending on healthcare or things that Americans desperately need while we bomb a region that doesn't want us there. Iraq just recently voted to have us leave. They've just made agreements with China. We've already lost. And so we can't just start escalating with Iran. And this is what Tulsi Gabbard has always been consistent on. Bring these troops home. And I feel like that should be an answer that should be honored. She's a veteran. She's served. She has top security clearance. She's been on just about every committee relevant to this you can talk to. And again, as a medic in a war zone, she saw people die, people get injured every single day. Let's hear if there's an insightful response from this reporter.
Let me ask you this. If we did pull our troops out, and we did pull our troops out of Iraq, and that left a vacuum for ISIS to constitute and threaten much of the region and the West, what do you say to those who say pulling out is just going to allow another terror organization to fill that void?
Yeah, not the best question. Pull-out questions are probably not the best in this type of context, and ISIS was created because of us pushing in to Iraq in the first place. So the question itself is false. Again, the organizations that we are actively fighting in the Middle East are created by us, mainly the CIA, but mainly us. We have ISIS to be thanked for us treating the generals in Iraq the way we did right after we went in there. We have Al-Qaeda to thank for us trying to fight the Russians in the Cold War. We're fighting our own enemies, and it's so obvious that every time we go into the Middle East, we create a group that we train to fight empires, and then we have to fight them again, even though we don't, and we never had to create them in the first place. We need to pull out. What are we doing there besides wasting money? We need to come back to America, create a new economy that doesn't require oil. And I guess if you really, here's a way. If you really want to take down Iran, if you really want to do it, Iran just found a bunch of reserve oil. Do a Green New Deal. Make that oil worthless. Let's keep going.
Well, our troops are there right now. This administration is deploying more and more, thousands more of our troops to the region and specifically to Iraq. And those actions are strengthening ISIS and Al-Qaeda and unnecessarily putting our troops in harm's way. And they're not going there to prevent this resurgence of ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the real national security threat that we have. That's why I'm saying we should pull our troops out of Iraq and Syria. If there is a growing threat we can have troops go in and fulfill that very specific achievable mission of defeating that threat and getting back out. But the current existing policy of the administration is essentially holding our troops hostage with a policy that is strengthening ISIS and al-Qaeda, and it's strengthening Iran's threats and capabilities.
Just one more question. What is your red line? When should the U.S. get involved?
So I was actually more interested in the orange line question, and if there's a blue circle somewhere in there, that would have really piqued my interest as well. But this goes all the way back to Obama had a red line in the Middle East at some point. Now everyone must have a red line. And Obama did so well, expanding 2 wars to 7, nothing bad. Drone strikes extraordinaire so that kids are afraid of blue skies. No, he did a good job. Thank you, reporter. This is still incredibly lazy reporting and incredibly lazy questions that Tulsi has to, in a sense, answer a question that she has to make a version of, because if you answer these questions that are being asked, it's like, what are you even doing? But at least I will give mainstream media this, because I'm a fair person. I try to be balanced. At least they're not going to be asking her about Assange. At least they're not saying, hey, by the way, you're also a Putin puppet. Hey, by the way, you're also a Modi supporter. Hey, also you're tied with Hindu nationalists because you know Modi and have met him, just like Obama did, but no one levies that against Obama. And a whole other bunch of stuff. But enough. Let's keep going.
Look, if there is a direct, imminent and direct threat against American forces and American interests, then that is where the assessment of intelligence and that decision has to be made. But here's the issue with that is, and why I'm so hesitant to even talk about red lines is, the Constitution has to be respected. And we've been hearing this thing about, imminent attack. Well, this administration has completely ignored Congress, citing Article 2 of the Constitution, yet failing to provide any evidence as such.
Okay, and there you have it. This is why Tulsi Gabbard is the right person to talk about foreign policy. Not only is she looking at the past and the context of what happened then and how it is affecting now, and how every time that the U.S. tries to involve itself in this, we make a situation worse. I remember she got a question from a coached 9-year-old in New Hampshire asking like a 7-year-old that was like, I'm going to talk specifics on foreign policy, and why don't we do this? And her point was, even in cases of genocide, when the U.S. goes in unilaterally, the UN isn't involved, we make it worse. We make a genocide worse. That's really, really hard to do. And even if you have people like Assad who have dropped barrel bombs, I mean, it's a civil war. He's killing his own people. That's what happens in a civil war. We can't make things better by getting involved, because the interest of the U.S. isn't to make things better. It's to make money off this, or to steal or tie up assets that countries like Russia want. Whereas we could be spending that money on our own people, bettering ourselves or helping our allies, or if we really wanted to, offering some form of Marshall Plan to Syria. But that's not what we do. And that's not how it works out. Instead, we destabilize regions, we create the enemies that we then fight, and we make things worse. And Gabbard understands that America needs to only be in places where it actually is needed, and to the point of the Trump administration abusing imminent threat. That's a great point. That there's an imminent threat clause that allows them to get around Congress and do what they want to do, but they're using it for everything. What's the point of having a clause that's only supposed to be used in a case of emergencies if it's used all the time and Congress does nothing about it? We just covered Nancy Pelosi, in all of her infinite wisdom, passing a bill to condemn Trump's war in Iran that has no teeth. If Trump wants to ignore it, he can. There's nothing about it that matters. It doesn't matter. If it passes, so what? It's a piece of paper he can wipe his ass with. What we need is legislation that says, hey, Trump, okay, if you want to go to the war with the Middle East, you're paying for it yourself out of your own pocket. You're a billionaire after all, aren't you? Why don't you fund our military for 3 hours before that runs out? Instead, Gabbard is at a spot now in the election where it's going to be very hard for her to catch up. However, she is placed very well to work with people like Sanders, which I feel like they have been very close and have something planned. But that's just me. That's just my perspective, guys. I'll see you next time.